All of our children lack the drive to be successful, but when a generation has been taught that it's entitled to its every whim, it's missing the core values that lead to personal achievement and satisfaction. And that's something we shouldn't wish on any generation. Good evening. When John Lennon was shot and killed, a lot of us baby boomers felt a deep loss. So I'm not going to tell the generation of Michael Jackson fans they can't mourn in their own way. I can certainly respect that. What I can't respect is confusing Michael the entertainer with Michael the person. Being great on stage never made anyone a great human being, and Michael Jackson never came close to that distinction, no matter what Al Sharpton is selling. Like Elvis before him, Michael Jackson ends up being another chapter in the great American tragedy, scarred into fame by a ruthless father and then imprisoned by the walls of his own mass popularity. Michael's legacy is record sales and weirdness. He could afford anything the world had to offer, yet he couldn't escape being the kind of adolescent who could never literally be comfortable in his own skin. So rest in peace, Michael. I don't think you ever meant anyone any harm, but the autopsy reports will show that if you're messed up enough, you'll eventually harm yourself. Bright and early tomorrow morning, the name of the next, or is it current, Rock Island mayor is to be decided by what envelope a county official chooses at random. I just hope somebody brings along some air freshener because this whole thing is starting to stink like a 20-pound carp left on hot asphalt. I'm not saying Dennis Pauly or David Levin is party to voter fraud here, but this has turned into a race where legal interpretation is trumping votes and chance will decide the will of the people. Okay, first, don't even swear in a mayor if there's any chance the outcome is going to be contested. Secondly, if an election judge doesn't initial some ballots, that judge should be thrown under the bus, not the votes. And finally, when one candidate can afford to keep the appeals process and the recounts going, and the other isn't flush with cash, voters start wondering whether money is buying out fairness. Coin toss situations are meant for football, not mayoral races. But if we're stuck with chance here, let's use the old Midwest tradition of marking off a table, one half Pauly, one half Levin. Then we place a live chicken in the middle, and wherever it poops, that decides our winner. And that dropping will also symbolize what a lot of us think about this whole process. First, happy birthday to my dad, who's 94 today. 94, amazing. Love you, Pop. Secondly, when it comes to health care reform, I suggest that a lot of folks take a good, hard look at themselves in a full-length mirror and admit that they could help reduce our health costs if they just reduce themselves. All the medical warnings about overeating and exercise are just not working, or the number of people who look like they should win a 4-H ribbon at the state fair wouldn't be growing. Why is it that most of us feel justified in demonizing cigarettes, but we feel like we're being offensive if we point out that someone's supersizing themselves to death? Tough love is our last chance to help those who can't see the cellulite at the end of the tunnel. If a person's only excuse is that they don't care, then it's our duty to make them feel guilty about it. For their own good, we need to peer pressure them with ad campaigns, billboards featuring rolls of flesh and messages like, both you and the economy are sagging, and it takes guts not to have a big gut. Is it so mean to state the obvious, or meaner to let people suffer with less energy and less self-esteem? We all don't have to look like fashion models, but when someone doesn't care if they're putting the die in diabetes, why should the rest of us care to pay part of their health care? Any word yet? You know, nothing tests my patience like waiting on lawyers and judges to decide who won an election over 2 months ago. Dennis Pauly collected 13 more votes than David Levin, and he's already been sworn in as Rock Island's mayor, but Levin swears some of the 6,000 plus ballots were flawed. Yesterday, a judge ruled that a total recount would be the only fair way to decide, but maybe we're overlooking an easier solution here. How about both parties agreeing to drop their legal briefs and deciding this like men? Gentlemen, I suggest a good old-fashioned duel with paintball guns. Think of the national headlines. Paulie and Levin, the Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton of their time, dueling for their honor. And a duel will save Mr. Levin the trouble of putting up a $5,000 security deposit to pay for this recount, which he loses if he loses again anyway. A duel would be the biggest political event in our history, and we can charge admission with all proceeds going to a Rock Island charity. Come on, gentlemen, give us 20 paces and fire. It'll at least give us something to do while we're waiting. And guys, get your paintball supplies at Kroger's Great Outdoors at 4002 11th Street in Rock Island. Tell Brian I sent ya. With Father's Day coming up next weekend, I wanted to get ahead of the game and thank all you guys out there who have made the effort, and it's an effort, to be a dad. Unfortunately, the number of biological fathers who aren't making that effort is growing, and it's only going to get worse. So here's my greeting card to you men out there who take little or no responsibility for the children you're leaving on society's front steps. First off, if you think your child is just another disposable item in your life, you're not a man, you're the worst kind of coward. Abandonment leaves a hole in a child's life that can never be filled. Our country is now in a cycle where fatherless children have created second and third generations of fatherless children. And there's no White House stimulus package that can undo this damage. When the guidelines that fathers set for sons and daughters are absent, we have too many behind-the-eight-ball kids who develop a defense mechanism against the world instead of wanting to be part of it. So, to the male species that takes pride in the act of conception with no intention of committing to it, do us all a favor. Take your Johnny Appleseed mentality and get it snipped. You'd be doing unloved children and the rest of us a huge favor. That is, if you're man enough. Memo to the decision makers in Washington. The future of big business isn't any of your business. The Obama administration believes that with enough regulation, they can stabilize the free market. But what it will end up doing is sabotaging the essential ingredients of capitalism. We can and should debate whether some corporations have gotten too big for this country's own good, but every business lives or dies based on risk and reward. And if the government is going to handpick companies and promise they won't fail, then they're changing the rules of Economics 101. No financial institution has ever been fail-safe because it would put competitors at a distinct disadvantage. Large, no-fail institutions are a sure bet to squeeze out smaller ones because, after all, what stockholder or lending institution wouldn't hedge their bets on a company that's got its back covered by the U.S. Treasury? This country was built on risk-taking, and it will be a devastating precedent to erase that possibility for a powerful few. If you're okay with letting the government get its hands on the free market, then I hope you'll be okay with those same hands eventually strangling it. Oh, don't get too close. I've got MHV, the media hysteria virus. You know, that nasty bug that goes around whenever the national media creates a pandemic panic before all the facts are in. Washing my hands was no match for all those headlines of doom, and after seeing Mexicans wearing masks in my sleep, just thinking about human contact gave me the chills and anxiety attacks, and that's just a half of it. I'm just sick about having to put down my pet pot-bellied pig, Sir Francis Bacon. But what choice did I have? The media had me thinking my little buddy was a viral petri dish. Rest in mud, faithful friend. Of course, it impacted my career as well because after Vice President Joe Biden said he'd never get on an airplane with all that swine flu going around, I told my boss, hey, I couldn't risk taking that business trip to L.A. And the boss said, fine, I hope you don't catch anything standing in the unemployment line. Thanks for the brave leadership, Joe. Look, we all know today's 24/7 media has a herd mentality, but when it keeps yelling, have you heard you might die? It makes the hysteria more potent than the virus. I'm going to make it, though. My doctor, Ron Pasella, has put me on a strict no media diet because instead of bed rest. He thinks I just need to give the whole news cycle a rest. I'll be all right. It's that time of year for prestigious universities to ask prestigious people to deliver commencement speeches, even if they are accused of being baby killers. When pro-lifers found out that America's pro-choice president was going to address this year's Notre Dame graduates, you couldn't have stirred up a bigger wasp's nest if an atheist had stolen the Virgin Mary and sold it off to a strip club. Even though over 80% of the graduates want their rock star president on stage, Catholic bishops and pro-life organizations are accusing the Catholic institution of sacrificing doctrine for prestige. Okay, here's the world outside this argument with no end. 1, no university with the IQ of a motorboard is going to turn down a chance to have a standing president speak. Secondly, universities are supposed to represent the spirit of debate and healthy disagreement. And most importantly, we need more pro-rest of their lifers, people who care about a life after it arrives. The millions of starving, uneducated, and unloved children in this world don't care who speaks at Notre Dame if they're just going to end up a sad statistic. Unless we follow through with the rest of new lives, all these pro-arguments just end up being a con for those people who never stand a chance. As we reach a certain age, those birthday candles on our cakes start to look more like warning flares along the highway of life. Danger, sagging skin, next 20 years. Arthritis, next turn. And rest in peace area straight ahead. That's why a lot of us prefer to downplay big number celebrations. But there's a birthday out there today I just have to make a big deal out of, because if she was never born, I might as well have not been either. She isn't just the girl I'd always dreamed of. She's the girl who shows me how to dream bigger. She lets the little boy in me still play, but inspires the man in me to always step up. She loves her work, but loves her cabin on the lake a whole lot more. She says, "I love you" to her children every day, and says, "I love you" more every day to her very lucky husband. She claims that some mirrors aren't kind to her anymore, but she's wrong. And there's no one I've ever had more fun and more meaningful conversations with than the birthday girl. So, here's a birthday toast to Meredith, my wife, and the best thing that ever happened in my life. Love you, birthday girl. Good evening. As we salute another Veterans Day, World War II has become ancient history to many Americans. But for those of us lucky enough to still know and talk with someone who lived it, our gratitude extends way beyond a single day. When this soldier left his factory job here in the Quad Cities to enlist, he knew only two things for certain. He was doing something that had to be done, and he hoped he didn't die in the process. As part of the D-Day invasion, he saw things that no one man can ever prepare himself for. When he survived, he wrote it off to luck and kept moving. Riding through liberated towns in France, he and his fellow soldiers smiled back at the pretty girls who considered them saviors. When a Jeep he was riding in one dark night lost a run-in with an American tank, his injuries took him off the front lines and out of the war. He believes that accident probably saved him from being killed in action. When that man came back to the Quad Cities, he got married, started a business, and helped raise a family. And not once, not even when his teenage son went all anti-Vietnam, did he ever bring up the war. Ever. Then one day, out of the blue, years after he'd retired, he started talking about it to his son, describing what he'd been a part of and how it had and still affected him. When the son saw his dad's tears, he realized that even though his dad considered himself just a normal guy, he and all the others like him had found the courage to be extraordinary. That soldier is my dad. He's 93 years old. He and the rest of our WW2 vets still have stories to tell. Let's listen and pass them on before the voices are all gone. Love you, Dad.